Thank you very much, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Communications, Senator Fifield. Can the Minister inform the Senate of how the government is reforming Australia's media laws to bring them into the digital age?
The Minister for Communications, Senator Fifield.
Thanks, Mr. President, and can I thank Senator Smith for his role as Chair of the Government's Communications and Arts Committee for his advice and counsel and stewardship of these matters through the internal processes of the party. Mr. President, I think all colleagues would recognise that Australia's media laws were crafted in an analogue era for an analogue world, and the way that consumers are accessing their media, the options that technology is presenting to consumers for their consumption of media is bit by bit rendering the existing media laws to be redundant. Also, a number of media organisations are finding that the existing media laws are constraining their capacity to configure themselves in ways that are the best for their business and best for consumers. So I have announced earlier today that the government will be seeking to abolish what is known as the 75% audience reach rule that prevents a collection of licences having more than 75% coverage of the Australian audience, and also the abolition of what's known as the 2 out of 3 rule, which prevents more than 2 out of 3 of the regulated traditional media platforms being controlled by an organisation merging, and those traditional platforms being print, TV and radio. This is good news for the media industry. It will be good news for consumers, and I think I'll shortly have the opportunity to share why it will also be particularly good news for regional consumers, Mr. President. But we need to make sure that the media laws that we have are appropriate and recognise the world that we live in today. We have to be always ready to change to suit technology.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can the Minister outline to the Senate what the government is doing to ensure that regional communities receive stronger local content protections?
Minister.
Mr. President, when you talk about media reform, understandably regional communities have a strong and legitimate interest in local content. And what we will be proposing is that 6 months after a trigger event, there will be new and higher local content requirements that will come into place for the aggregated market. So going up from 720 to 900 points over a 6-week period. But also, if there is a trigger event in major population areas in a non-aggregated market, we will introduce for the first time local content requirements. So following a trigger event, they, in those areas, will go from 0 to 360 points per 6-week period. So higher thresholds, higher baseline of local content for aggregated areas, and for the first time there will be a baseline of local content for major population centres in non-aggregated areas, and good news for consumers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can the Minister advise the Senate how the government will protect diversity in the Australian media?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, the greatest protection these days for diversity actually comes by way of technology and consumer choice. There are new media operations. Consumers have greater capacity to access them than ever before. That's first and foremost. But for those who may have some concerns, we can point to the remaining media laws, that being the 5-4 rule, which requires there to be 5 voices in metropolitan areas and 4 voices in regional areas. Also, there will still be the 1-to-a-market rule, 1 TV licence per market, the 2-to-a-market rule, only 2 TV licences per market. There will also be the ongoing ACCC protections. Those don't change. There will also be the existing FIRB requirements. Those don't change. So there are still those historic protections that are there. But as I say, Senator Smith, the greatest protection, the greatest guarantee of diversity is technology, the plethora of media outlets and the opportunity for consumers to access them.
Thank you, Minister.